Question 1. Upon reviewing a client's investment portfolio at MasTec, a client expresses a strong desire to invest in a specific type of security that, upon initial review, appears to be restricted for retail investors under current SEC guidelines due to its complexity and risk profile. The client is insistent, believing this investment will yield significantly higher returns. What is the most appropriate course of action for the MasTec financial advisor? Option A. Proceed with the investment as requested by the client, assuming the client understands the risks and has provided explicit consent, and document their consent. Option B. Advise the client that while the investment is restricted, a workaround can be found through a related but less regulated product that offers similar potential returns. Option C. Inform the client that the request cannot be fulfilled and end the discussion without providing further explanation or alternative options. Option D. Clearly explain to the client the specific SEC regulations that restrict this type of investment for retail investors, and discuss alternative, compliant investment strategies that align with their financial goals. The correct answer is D. Clearly explain to the client the specific SEC regulations that restrict this type of investment for retail investors, and discuss alternative, compliant investment strategies that align with their financial goals. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's desire for a specific outcome and the ethical and regulatory obligations of a financial advisor. MasTec, as a firm operating within the U.S. regulatory framework, must prioritize compliance with the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) regulations and FINRA rules over client preferences when those preferences would lead to a violation. The advisor's duty of care and fiduciary responsibility, particularly if acting as an investment advisor, mandates acting in the client's best interest, which includes adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. The correct approach involves clearly explaining to the client the regulatory limitations and the firm's compliance policies. This demonstrates transparency and upholds the advisor's ethical duty to educate the client about the rules governing their investments. It prioritizes regulatory adherence and client protection, aligning with the SEC's focus on investor safeguarding and FINRA emphasis on ethical conduct and suitability. This approach ensures that MasTec maintains its integrity and avoids potential legal and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the client's request, despite knowing it violates regulations, would constitute a serious breach of ethical and regulatory standards. This could lead to severe penalties for both the individual advisor and MasTec, including fines, sanctions, and loss of licenses. It demonstrates a disregard for investor protection and the integrity of the financial markets, which are core tenets of SEC and FINRA oversight. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to find a loophole or a technically compliant but ethically questionable workaround, also fails to meet the standard of professional conduct. While it might appear to satisfy the client's immediate request, it risks misrepresenting the situation and could still be viewed as a violation of the spirit of the regulations. This approach undermines the trust placed in financial professionals and the regulatory system. Finally, an approach that dismisses the client's request without a thorough explanation of the regulatory reasons would be unprofessional and could damage the client relationship. While compliance is paramount, effective client management involves clear communication and a willingness to explore alternative compliance solutions. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the client's objective. 2. Identifying all relevant regulations and firm policies. 3. Assessing whether the client's objective can be met within those constraints. 4. If not, clearly and respectfully explaining the regulatory barriers to the client. 5. Proposing alternative compliance strategies that achieve a similar or acceptable outcome for the client. 6. Documenting all discussions and decisions. Question 2. Strategic planning requires MasTec to consider various approaches to market expansion. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical business practices within the specified jurisdiction? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive assessment of all applicable laws, regulations, and industry guidelines relevant to MasTec's proposed expansion activities before finalizing any strategic decisions. Option B. Exploring potential ambiguities in existing regulations to identify opportunities for aggressive market entry that may push the boundaries of current legal interpretation. Option C. Relying on industry best practices as a proxy for regulatory compliance, assuming that what is common is permissible. Option D. Prioritizing market expansion strategies that offer the highest potential short-term revenue, with a secondary review of regulatory implications. The correct answer is D. Prioritizing market expansion strategies that offer the highest potential short-term revenue, with a secondary review of regulatory implications. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must ensure its strategic planning processes align with all applicable laws and guidelines. The core difficulty lies in balancing business objectives with the imperative to maintain compliance, which can sometimes involve competing priorities or require nuanced interpretation of regulations. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement strategies that are both effective for business growth and fully compliant, avoiding any actions that could lead to regulatory scrutiny or penalties. The correct approach involves a thorough review of all relevant regulations and guidelines that govern MasTec's operations, ensuring that strategic decisions are informed by and adhere to these requirements. This proactive and compliance-first mindset is crucial for long-term sustainability and reputation. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principles of responsible corporate governance and the legal obligations MasTec has to operate within the established framework. Adherence to these regulations is not merely a suggestion, but a mandatory requirement for all entities operating within the jurisdiction. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate financial gains without adequate consideration of regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations and could expose MasTec to significant fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about regulatory compliance without concrete verification is equally problematic. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a potentially dangerous overconfidence that can lead to unintentional breaches. Finally, an approach that seeks to circumvent or exploit loopholes in regulations, rather than adhering to their spirit and letter, is unethical and carries substantial risks, undermining the integrity of the company and the industry. Professionals tasked with strategic planning at MasTec should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves consulting legal counsel and compliance officers, conducting thorough risk assessments that include regulatory compliance, and integrating compliance considerations into every stage of the planning process. The framework should prioritize ethical conduct and long-term viability over short-term expediency, ensuring that all strategic initiatives are robust, defensible, and fully aligned with MasTec's legal and ethical responsibilities. Question 3. Market research demonstrates that MasTec is considering a new marketing campaign to highlight its service advantages over key competitors. To inform this campaign, MasTec's marketing team has gathered publicly available information about competitor pricing, service offerings, and customer reviews. Which of the following approaches best ensures MasTec's marketing campaign adheres to regulatory requirements and ethical standards? Option A. MasTec's marketing team submits all proposed campaign materials and claims to the company's legal and compliance departments for a thorough review and approval before public release. Option B. MasTec proceeds with the marketing campaign based on the gathered competitive information, assuming that publicly available data is inherently compliant. Option C. MasTec utilizes the competitive analysis to create marketing materials that make broad, comparative statements about its superiority without specific, verifiable data points. Option D. MasTec's marketing team directly contacts former employees of competitors to gather insider information about their pricing strategies and service limitations. The correct answer is A. MasTec's marketing team submits all proposed campaign materials and claims to the company's legal and compliance departments for a thorough review and approval before public release. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for MasTec employees due to the inherent conflict between seeking competitive advantages and adhering to strict regulatory frameworks designed to ensure fair market practices. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for even seemingly minor information gathering to cross legal or ethical boundaries if not conducted with a thorough understanding of applicable regulations. The correct approach involves MasTec's internal legal and compliance teams conducting a thorough review of all proposed marketing materials and strategies. This is the right approach because it directly aligns with the regulatory framework governing marketing and advertising practices, which mandates that all claims made by a company must be truthful, substantiated, and not misleading. By involving legal and compliance, MasTec ensures that its competitive analysis and subsequent marketing efforts are not only effective, but also fully compliant with all relevant laws and guidelines. This proactive measure prevents potential violations that could lead to fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with marketing strategies based solely on the competitive analysis without internal legal or compliance review. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the essential safeguard against regulatory noncompliance. Such an approach risks making unsubstantiated claims or engaging in deceptive practices, which are explicitly prohibited by regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on information gathered through unethical or illegal means, such as industrial espionage or the misuse of confidential competitor data. This is a severe ethical and legal failure, as it violates principles of fair competition and can result in significant legal penalties and irreparable damage to MasTec's reputation. A third incorrect approach would be to interpret competitive data in a way that exaggerates MasTec's own offerings or disparages competitors without factual basis. This constitutes misleading advertising, a direct violation of consumer protection laws and ethical marketing standards. Professionals at MasTec should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding the scope of applicable regulations regarding marketing, advertising, and competitive practices. 2. Consulting with internal legal and compliance departments at the earliest stages of strategy development. 3. Ensuring all claims are verifiable and supported by evidence. 4. Maintaining a commitment to fair competition and avoiding any actions that could be construed as deceptive or unfair. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating internal policies to reflect evolving regulatory landscapes. Question 4. Examination of the data shows that MasTec is undertaking a critical project requiring the transfer of client-related operational data to a remote team. The project deadline is imminent, and the standard secure data transfer protocol is experiencing technical difficulties, causing delays. The project manager is considering using an alternative, less secure method to expedite the transfer and meet the deadline. Which of the following actions should MasTec's project manager take to ensure compliance with regulatory frameworks and ethical obligations? Option A. Transfer the data using the less secure method, but instruct the remote team to delete it immediately after use to mitigate potential exposure. Option B. Proceed with the less secure data transfer method to meet the project deadline, assuming the risk is minimal for internal operational data. Option C. Delay the project until the standard secure data transfer protocol is fully functional, regardless of the impact on the deadline. Option D. Immediately investigate and implement a secure, alternative data transfer method that complies with MasTec's data privacy policies and relevant regulations, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the project timeline. Correct answer is D. Immediately investigate and implement a secure, alternative data transfer method that complies with MasTec's data privacy policies and relevant regulations, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the project timeline. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a company's immediate operational needs and its regulatory obligations regarding data privacy. MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated environment, must prioritize compliance with applicable laws and guidelines. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the urgency of a project with the imperative to protect sensitive information, ensuring that any data handling adheres strictly to established protocols. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could lead to regulatory penalties, reputational damage, or a breach of trust with clients and stakeholders. The correct approach involves a thorough review of MasTec's internal data handling policies and relevant regulatory frameworks to determine the appropriate method for data transfer. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes adherence to established legal and ethical standards. Specifically, it ensures that MasTec acts in accordance with data protection regulations, which typically mandate secure transmission methods for sensitive information. By consulting internal policies and external regulations, MasTec demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship, mitigating risks associated with unauthorized access or disclosure. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the data transfer using an unsecured method simply to meet the project deadline. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory requirements for data security and privacy. Such an action could lead to a breach of data protection laws, resulting in significant fines and legal repercussions for MasTec. Furthermore, it undermines client confidence and damages the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the data sensitivity and transfer it via a method that is convenient but not compliant. This demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. It exposes MasTec to legal liabilities and could result in severe penalties, including sanctions and reputational harm. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that because the data is for an internal project, standard security protocols are not necessary. This is a dangerous assumption, as many data privacy regulations apply to internal data handling as well, especially if it contains personal or confidential information. Failure to apply appropriate security measures, even internally, can still lead to breaches and regulatory scrutiny. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the data's sensitivity, the applicable regulatory requirements, and MasTec's internal policies. When faced with a conflict between operational urgency and compliance, the priority must always be to uphold regulatory and ethical standards. This involves seeking clarification from legal or compliance departments, exploring secure alternative methods that meet both operational and regulatory needs, and documenting all decisions and actions taken. The goal is to find a solution that is both efficient and compliant, rather than compromising on the latter for the sake of expediency. Question 5. Assessment of MasTec's approach to integrating a new cloud-based project management system that will handle client data, considering the need for rapid service expansion. Which of the following actions best demonstrates MasTec's commitment to regulatory compliance and data protection? Option A. Relying on the cloud provider's standard security measures without further investigation, assuming they meet MasTec's compliance needs. Option B. Implementing the new system immediately to support the accelerated service rollout and addressing any data privacy concerns as they arise. Option C. Proceeding with the integration and informing clients about the new system's data handling practices only after the rollout is complete. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, for the new system, reviewing vendor security certifications, and updating internal data handling policies before full deployment. The correct answer is B. Implementing the new system immediately to support the accelerated service rollout and addressing any data privacy concerns as they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid growth and the absolute necessity of adhering to regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data privacy and security. MasTec, as a company operating in a regulated industry, must prioritize its legal and ethical obligations over business expediency. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with the stringent requirements of data protection laws, ensuring that growth strategies do not inadvertently lead to non-compliance. Careful judgment is required to identify potential risks and implement robust controls. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and mitigating risks associated with data handling during the expansion of services. This means conducting thorough due diligence on any new technologies or third-party vendors, ensuring they meet MasTec's data protection standards and comply with relevant regulations. It also entails updating internal policies and training employees on new data handling procedures. This approach is correct because it demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship, which is a fundamental requirement for any business, especially one handling sensitive information. It aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and security by design, often mandated by data protection frameworks. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the expansion without adequately assessing the data privacy and security implications of new services or third-party integrations. This could lead to breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that existing data protection measures are sufficient for the expanded scope of operations without a formal review and update. This oversight fails to acknowledge that increased data processing or new types of data may require enhanced security protocols or different consent mechanisms. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed to market over thorough compliance checks, potentially overlooking critical vulnerabilities or legal requirements. This demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations and a failure to uphold professional responsibility. Professionals should employ a risk-based approach to decision-making. This involves identifying potential compliance risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, and developing strategies to mitigate them. Before implementing any new service or engaging with a new vendor, a comprehensive compliance review should be conducted. This review should consider all applicable laws and regulations, internal policies, and ethical considerations. Regular audits and updates to compliance procedures are also crucial to ensure ongoing adherence to evolving regulatory landscapes. Question 6. Which approach would be most appropriate for a MasTec project manager to adopt when encountering a situation where the interpretation of a specific safety regulation is unclear, and proceeding without clarification could lead to a deviation from standard safety protocols? Option A. Rely on the informal advice of a senior colleague who has experience with similar regulations, without seeking official confirmation. Option B. Immediately halt the specific task related to the unclear regulation until a definitive interpretation can be obtained from the relevant regulatory authority or MasTec's internal compliance department. Option C. Document the ambiguity and proceed with the most common industry practice, assuming it is acceptable unless explicitly prohibited. Option D. Proceed with the interpretation that seems most logical and efficient, assuming it aligns with the general intent of the regulation. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the interpretation that seems most logical and efficient, assuming it aligns with the general intent of the regulation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must ensure all its business practices, particularly those involving client interactions and data handling, strictly adhere to the established regulatory framework. The challenge lies in balancing efficient operational procedures with the imperative of unwavering compliance, especially when faced with potential shortcuts that might seem beneficial in the short term but carry significant regulatory risks. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement practices that are not only effective, but also legally sound and ethically responsible. The correct approach involves proactively seeking clarification and guidance from the relevant regulatory bodies or internal compliance departments when encountering ambiguity in regulations or best practices. This demonstrates a commitment to understanding and upholding the spirit and letter of the law. Specifically, consulting the MasTec Internal Compliance Manual, and if necessary, reaching out to the appropriate regulatory authority for an official interpretation ensures that actions taken are fully compliant. This proactive stance mitigates risk, fosters a culture of compliance within MasTec, and protects the company from potential penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. It aligns with the fundamental ethical obligation to operate with integrity and transparency. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with an assumption about regulatory requirements without verification is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for due diligence and a potential violation of the regulatory framework by acting on incomplete or inaccurate information. Such an assumption can lead to unintentional noncompliance, exposing MasTec to significant penalties. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the ambiguity and hope it does not lead to an issue, is equally problematic. This passive stance represents a dereliction of duty and a failure to manage risk effectively. It suggests a lack of commitment to regulatory adherence and can be interpreted as willful ignorance, which carries severe consequences if discovered. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed or perceived efficiency over regulatory certainty is fundamentally flawed. While efficiency is important, it must never come at the expense of compliance. This approach prioritizes short-term gains over long-term integrity and regulatory standing, creating a substantial risk for MasTec. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential regulatory implications of any action. When ambiguity arises, the immediate step should be to consult internal policies and procedures. If clarity is still lacking, seeking external guidance from the relevant regulatory body or legal counsel specializing in the applicable jurisdiction is paramount. This process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and fully compliant with all applicable laws and guidelines. Question 7. Implementation of a new construction project at MasTec has revealed a potential safety hazard on site that was not identified during the initial risk assessment. Your direct supervisor instructs you to proceed with the work as planned, stating that addressing the hazard would cause significant delays and cost overruns, and that it is not a big deal. You believe the hazard poses a genuine risk to worker safety. Option A. Report the safety hazard through MasTec's official safety reporting channels, documenting your observations and the supervisor's instruction, and proceed with work only after the hazard is assessed and mitigated according to company policy and relevant safety regulations. Option B. Directly confront your supervisor, expressing your strong disagreement with their assessment and demanding that work be halted until the hazard is addressed, potentially creating an adversarial situation. Option C. Proceed with the work as instructed by your supervisor, assuming their judgment is correct and prioritizing project timelines and cost efficiency over your personal assessment of the risk. Option D. Immediately contact an external regulatory agency to report the safety hazard and your supervisor's directive, without first attempting to resolve the issue through MasTec's internal reporting procedures. The correct answer is A. Report the safety hazard through MasTec's official safety reporting channels, documenting your observations and the supervisor's instruction, and proceed with work only after the hazard is assessed and mitigated according to company policy and relevant safety regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a MasTec employee due to the inherent conflict between a company directive and a potential ethical obligation to report a safety concern. The challenge lies in balancing loyalty to the employer with the responsibility to ensure a safe working environment, which is paramount in the construction industry. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without jeopardizing personal integrity or the safety of others. The correct approach involves prioritizing safety and adhering to established reporting protocols, even if it means going against a direct instruction from a supervisor that appears to circumvent proper procedures. This aligns with MasTec's commitment to safety and regulatory compliance. Specifically, reporting the observed safety hazard through the designated channels, such as the company's safety hotline or directly to the safety department, is the ethically and regulatorily sound action. This ensures that the hazard is documented and addressed by the appropriate personnel, fulfilling the employee's duty to contribute to a safe workplace, as mandated by general workplace safety principles and potentially specific OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, guidelines if this is a U.S.-based assessment. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the safety concern to avoid conflict with the supervisor. This is ethically unacceptable as it prioritizes personal comfort over the well-being of colleagues and potentially the public. It also creates a regulatory risk for MasTec by allowing a known hazard to persist, potentially violating OSHA standards and leading to accidents, injuries, or fatalities. Another incorrect approach would be to directly confront the supervisor in a way that is accusatory or insubordinate without first attempting to use the proper reporting channels. While raising concerns is important, the method of communication matters. This could lead to unnecessary interpersonal conflict and may not effectively resolve the safety issue if not handled professionally. A further incorrect approach would be to report the issue to external regulatory bodies without first attempting to resolve it internally through MasTec's established safety reporting mechanisms. While whistleblowing is a protected right in many circumstances, it is generally expected that employees will utilize internal channels first to allow the company an opportunity to rectify the situation. Premature external reporting could be seen as bypassing internal processes and could damage the employer-employee relationship without necessarily achieving a faster or more effective resolution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the core issue. Is there a safety hazard or a potential violation of company policy or regulation? 2. Consulting company policy. Review MasTec safety procedures and reporting guidelines. 3. Prioritizing safety and ethics. Recognize that safety and ethical conduct are non-negotiable. 4. Utilizing established channels. Follow the designated reporting procedures for safety concerns. 5. Documenting observations. Keep a record of the hazard and any communication regarding it. 6. Seeking clarification if needed. If unsure about the process, consult with a trusted supervisor, HR, or the safety department. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a minor equipment malfunction impacting a specific project timeline for MasTec, but also a low likelihood of a severe regulatory violation due to an oversight in environmental permitting for a different project. Which approach best reflects a proactive and compliant risk management strategy for MasTec? Option A. Implement a standardized checklist for all potential risks, assuming that addressing common issues will cover the more severe ones indirectly. Option B. Focus solely on addressing the equipment malfunction risk, as it has a higher likelihood and is more immediately impactful on project delivery. Option C. Document both risks but defer mitigation planning for the severe regulatory violation until it becomes a more immediate concern, prioritizing immediate project operational issues. Option D. Prioritize developing detailed mitigation plans for the severe regulatory violation risk, even though its likelihood is low, and allocate resources for enhanced monitoring and expert consultation. The correct answer is D. Prioritize developing detailed mitigation plans for the severe regulatory violation risk, even though its likelihood is low, and allocate resources for enhanced monitoring and expert consultation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must balance operational efficiency with robust risk management. The challenge lies in accurately assessing and responding to identified risks, ensuring that the chosen mitigation strategies are both effective and compliant with relevant regulations, without over-allocating resources or creating unnecessary operational burdens. Careful judgment is required to prioritize risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, and to select mitigation actions that are proportionate and sustainable. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of risk identification, assessment, and mitigation planning, aligned with MasTec's internal policies and applicable regulatory requirements. This approach ensures that potential threats to project timelines, budget, safety, and compliance are proactively addressed. Specifically, focusing on the highest priority risks identified by the risk matrix and developing tailored mitigation plans demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible corporate conduct. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and risk management expected of companies in the construction and infrastructure sectors, which often fall under specific regulatory oversight concerning safety, environmental impact, and financial reporting. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay risks that, while potentially less frequent, carry a severe impact, such as those related to major safety incidents or significant regulatory noncompliance. Failure to adequately address high-impact risks could lead to substantial financial penalties, reputational damage, and potential harm to individuals or the environment, violating the implicit duty of care and regulatory obligations. Another incorrect approach is to implement generic, one-size-fits-all mitigation strategies without considering the specific context of each risk. This can lead to ineffective risk management, wasted resources, and a failure to meet the nuanced requirements of different regulatory frameworks. Furthermore, failing to document the risk assessment and mitigation process leaves MasTec vulnerable to scrutiny and unable to demonstrate compliance or learn from past experiences. Professionals at MasTec should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the risk matrix and its implications. This involves clearly defining the criteria for risk assessment, likelihood, and impact, systematically evaluating each identified risk against these criteria, and then prioritizing them. For each high-priority risk, a specific, actionable, and measurable mitigation plan should be developed. This plan should consider the cost-effectiveness of the mitigation, its potential impact on operations, and its alignment with regulatory requirements. Regular review and updating of the risk assessment and mitigation plans are crucial to ensure ongoing effectiveness and adaptability to changing circumstances. Question 9. During the evaluation of a critical project requiring immediate staffing, a hiring manager at MasTec is presented with a candidate who has strong industry connections and a compelling resume, but whose background check is taking longer than anticipated due to an administrative backlog. The hiring manager is considering proceeding with the offer based on the candidate's apparent qualifications and the urgent need for their skills, while deferring the final verification steps until after the candidate has started. Option A. Hire the candidate based on informal references and the hiring manager's personal assessment, bypassing the formal background check process entirely due to the urgency. Option B. Delay the hiring decision until the full background check is completed and all verification steps are successfully concluded, even if it means missing the project deadline. Option C. Proceed with the offer, contingent upon successful completion of all background verification steps within a defined, short time frame after the candidate's start date. Option D. Extend a verbal offer of employment immediately, allowing the candidate to begin work while the background check is still pending, with no specific timeline for completion. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the offer, contingent upon successful completion of all background verification steps within a defined, short time frame after the candidate's start date. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate operational needs with the long-term implications of its hiring practices, specifically concerning compliance with MasTec's internal policies and relevant employment regulations. The pressure to fill critical roles quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise thorough vetting, potentially resulting in the hiring of unqualified or unsuitable candidates, which carries significant risks for MasTec. Careful judgment is required to ensure that speed does not override diligence. The correct approach involves prioritizing a comprehensive background check and verification process, even under time constraints. This aligns with best practices in human resources and regulatory compliance, ensuring that MasTec adheres to its own established hiring standards and any applicable employment laws. Such a process mitigates risks associated with negligent hiring, protects the company's reputation, and ensures that new hires possess the necessary qualifications and ethical standing to perform their duties effectively and safely. This approach is ethically sound and legally defensible, demonstrating MasTec's commitment to responsible employment practices. An incorrect approach that bypasses or, significantly, abbreviates the standard background check process for expediency is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence exposes MasTec to legal liabilities, including potential lawsuits if a poorly vetted employee causes harm or damages. It also violates internal company policies designed to maintain a competent and trustworthy workforce. Furthermore, it can lead to a decline in operational quality and safety standards, undermining the company's overall effectiveness and reputation. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on informal references or personal endorsements without independent verification is also flawed. While informal feedback can be supplementary, it does not replace the need for structured verification of credentials, employment history, and any necessary certifications or licenses. This approach risks overlooking critical information that could have been uncovered through a formal process, leading to the same liabilities and operational risks as bypassing checks altogether. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of MasTec's hiring policies and relevant employment laws. When faced with time pressures, professionals should advocate for the necessary resources and time to complete essential vetting steps. If absolute adherence to the full process is impossible within the deadline, the decision-maker must assess the acceptable level of risk and communicate this assessment transparently to stakeholders, potentially exploring temporary solutions or phased onboarding while completing the full vetting. The ultimate goal is to make an informed decision that balances operational needs with the imperative of responsible hiring. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a MasTec project manager has recently been approached by a vendor offering significant personal gifts and entertainment, which could be perceived as influencing future contract awards. What is the most appropriate course of action for the project manager and MasTec's compliance department to ensure adherence to ethical standards and regulatory guidelines? Option A. The project manager should accept the gifts and entertainment, assuming they are not explicitly prohibited by MasTec's policy, and use their best judgment to ensure fairness in future contract decisions. Option B. The project manager should politely decline the gifts and entertainment, document the offer and their refusal, and immediately report the incident to MasTec's compliance department for review and guidance. Option C. The project manager should accept the gifts and entertainment and then discreetly inform their direct supervisor, who will decide whether to escalate the matter to compliance. Option D. The project manager should accept the gifts and entertainment as they are common business courtesies, and inform the compliance department only if a formal complaint is filed. The correct answer is D. The project manager should accept the gifts and entertainment, as they are common business courtesies, and inform the compliance department only if a formal complaint is filed. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must ensure its internal policies and employee actions align with all applicable laws and ethical standards. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these standards to a specific situation involving potential conflicts of interest and the proper handling of sensitive information. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between acceptable business practices and those that could lead to regulatory violations or reputational damage. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy. This means MasTec employees should be encouraged and empowered to report any potential conflicts of interest or ethical concerns to the appropriate internal channels, such as the compliance department or legal counsel. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and the prevention of misconduct. Specifically, it upholds the spirit of regulations that require companies to establish and maintain effective compliance programs designed to detect and prevent violations. By fostering an environment where employees feel safe to raise concerns, MasTec can identify and address potential issues before they escalate into significant problems, thereby protecting the company and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay reports of potential conflicts of interest. This is professionally unacceptable because it demonstrates a disregard for established compliance procedures and regulatory expectations. Such inaction could be interpreted as a failure to implement adequate internal controls, leaving MasTec vulnerable to regulatory penalties and legal action. Another incorrect approach would be to retaliate against or penalize employees who report concerns in good faith. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure, as it actively discourages whistleblowing and creates a toxic work environment. Many regulations protect whistleblowers from retaliation, and such actions would likely result in significant legal repercussions for MasTec. A third incorrect approach would be to handle reported conflicts of interest in an ad hoc or inconsistent manner, without a clear, documented process. This lack of standardization undermines the integrity of the compliance program and can lead to perceptions of unfairness or bias, further eroding trust and potentially creating legal vulnerabilities. Professionals should approach situations involving potential conflicts of interest by first understanding the relevant company policies and regulatory requirements. They should then prioritize open communication, encouraging employees to report any concerns without fear of reprisal. When a concern is raised, the professional decision-making process should involve a thorough, objective investigation, documented appropriately, and handled in accordance with established procedures. This systematic approach ensures that all potential issues are addressed fairly, consistently, and in compliance with legal and ethical obligations. Question 11. Performance analysis shows that a MasTec project team is consistently exceeding its quarterly installation targets, contributing significantly to the company's overall positive performance metrics. However, during a routine internal review, a junior analyst discovers a potential discrepancy in the data used to calculate these installation numbers, suggesting that some installations might have been double-counted or not fully completed according to MasTec's quality standards. The project manager, aware of the pressure to meet targets and the positive impact this team's performance has on their own review, is considering overlooking the analyst's concerns to maintain the appearance of strong performance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the MasTec project manager in this situation? Option A. Immediately initiate a thorough investigation into the data discrepancy, halt the reporting of the inflated performance numbers, and ensure accurate data is collected and reported according to MasTec's established policies and relevant U.S. regulations. Option B. Proceed with reporting the current performance numbers as they are, assuming the analyst's findings are minor and will not significantly impact the overall positive trend, and address any potential issues later if they become more prominent. Option C. Report the current performance numbers but include a vague disclaimer about potential data inconsistencies without conducting a full investigation to mitigate immediate scrutiny. Option D. Instruct the junior analyst to disregard their findings and focus on other tasks, emphasizing the importance of meeting the current performance targets and the positive contribution the team is making. Correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a thorough investigation into the data discrepancy, halt the reporting of the inflated performance numbers, and ensure accurate data is collected and reported according to MasTec's established policies and relevant U.S. regulations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for MasTec employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving performance targets and adhering to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet metrics can incentivize shortcuts or overlooking minor infractions, which, if unchecked, can escalate into significant compliance breaches. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with the imperative to operate within legal and ethical boundaries. The correct approach involves prioritizing a thorough investigation and adherence to established MasTec policies and relevant U.S. regulations, even if it means a temporary delay in reporting positive performance. This aligns with the U.S. regulatory framework that emphasizes accurate reporting and internal controls to prevent fraud and ensure compliance. Specifically, regulations like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX) mandate robust internal controls and accurate financial reporting, making any attempt to misrepresent performance a serious violation. Ethically, MasTec employees are expected to act with integrity and transparency, which includes reporting performance truthfully and addressing any discrepancies through proper channels. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking the discrepancy to meet the immediate performance target is professionally unacceptable. This directly violates the ethical principle of honesty and integrity. From a regulatory standpoint, it could be construed as an attempt to mislead stakeholders or regulators, potentially leading to violations of securities laws if MasTec is a publicly traded company, or other contractual obligations. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately report the inflated numbers without verification, also constitutes a regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for accuracy, which is a cornerstone of responsible business practice and regulatory compliance. It could lead to inaccurate internal assessments, flawed strategic decisions, and potential liability if the misrepresentation is discovered by external parties or regulators. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the core issue. Recognize the discrepancy between reported performance and actual performance. 2. Consult internal policies and procedures. Refer to MasTec's Code of Conduct, ethics policies, and any specific guidelines related to performance reporting. 3. Seek clarification and verification. Gather all necessary data to confirm the actual performance metrics. 4. Report accurately and transparently. Communicate the verified performance data through the appropriate channels, highlighting any discrepancies and the steps taken to resolve them. 5. Escalate if necessary. If the discrepancy is significant or involves potential misconduct, follow MasTec's established escalation procedures to inform relevant management or compliance departments. 6. Prioritize compliance and ethics. Always ensure that actions taken are in line with U.S. laws, regulations, and ethical standards, even if it impacts short-term performance metrics. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that MasTec could significantly reduce operational costs by streamlining certain project management workflows. However, some of the proposed streamlining measures involve bypassing standard approval processes and reducing the frequency of safety inspections. What is the most responsible course of action for MasTec's management to take? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the efficiency study's recommendation, cross-referencing them with MasTec's internal compliance policies and all relevant federal and state safety regulations to ensure no violations occur before any changes are considered. Option B. Implement the proposed workflow changes immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the risk of minor deviations is acceptable for efficiency gains. Option C. Delegate the decision-making to the project managers directly involved, allowing them to implement changes they deem efficient based on their on-the-ground experience, without formal oversight. Option D. Prioritize the cost-saving aspects of the study and implement the changes that offer the most immediate financial benefit, deferring any potential regulatory reviews until after implementation. Correct answer is B. Implement the proposed workflow changes immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the risk of minor deviations is acceptable for efficiency gains. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must balance the pursuit of operational efficiency with strict adherence to legal and ethical standards. The efficiency study's findings, while potentially beneficial for cost savings, could inadvertently lead to practices that violate regulatory requirements or compromise safety and quality if not implemented thoughtfully. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes do not create undue risk or conflict with established guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the efficiency study's recommendations against all applicable MasTec policies, industry best practices, and relevant regulatory frameworks. This ensures that any implemented changes are not only efficient, but also compliant and safe. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principle of responsible corporate conduct, which mandates that companies operate within the bounds of the law and ethical considerations. Regulatory bodies often require companies to have robust internal controls and compliance programs to prevent violations. By prioritizing a comprehensive review, MasTec demonstrates a commitment to these principles, mitigating potential legal liabilities and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost-saving aspects of the efficiency study without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations, potentially leading to violations of safety regulations, environmental laws, or labor standards, depending on the nature of the efficiency improvements. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper validation, risks introducing inefficiencies or non-compliance. This bypasses the due diligence necessary to ensure that proposed changes are effective and legally sound. A third incorrect approach, which involves ignoring potential negative impacts on employee well-being or operational integrity in the pursuit of speed, violates ethical responsibilities and could lead to decreased morale, increased errors, and ultimately greater costs in the long run. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework when evaluating such findings. This framework typically involves 1. Understanding the objective. Identify the core goal of the efficiency study. 2. Information gathering. Collect all relevant data, including the study's findings, existing policies, and regulatory requirements. 3. Option generation. Brainstorm potential courses of action. 4. Evaluation. Assess each option against criteria such as compliance, safety, cost-effectiveness, and ethical implications. 5. Decision and implementation. Select the best option and plan its execution. 6. Monitoring and review. Track the results and make adjustments as needed. This systematic process ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with the company's values and legal obligations. Question 13. The performance metrics show a significant deviation in project completion times for a recent MasTec infrastructure project compared to historical averages. Considering the potential implications for regulatory reporting and client satisfaction, which of the following actions best demonstrates a commitment to professional integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Assume the deviation is due to external factors beyond MasTec's control and therefore does not require detailed reporting or explanation. Option B. Immediately adjust the reported completion times to align with historical averages, assuming minor variances are acceptable. Option C. Focus on highlighting other positive performance indicators from the project to offset the impact of the delayed completion times. Option D. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the deviation. Consult MasTec's internal compliance team and relevant project documentation, and then report the actual metrics with a clear explanation of any contributing factors. The correct answer is B. Immediately adjust the reported completion times to align with historical averages, assuming minor variances are acceptable. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must ensure its performance metrics are not only accurate, but also comply with all applicable regulations. The challenge lies in interpreting these metrics in a way that is both operationally sound and legally defensible, especially when faced with potential discrepancies or areas for improvement. Careful judgment is required to avoid misrepresenting performance, which could lead to regulatory scrutiny, financial penalties, or damage to MasTec's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the performance metrics, cross-referencing them with MasTec's internal policies and relevant regulatory requirements. This approach is best professional practice because it prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and compliance. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory adherence expected of companies like MasTec. By seeking clarification and ensuring alignment with established standards, this method upholds ethical obligations and mitigates legal risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on presenting the most favorable interpretation without verifying underlying data or regulatory compliance fails to uphold professional integrity. This could lead to misleading stakeholders and potential violations of regulations that mandate accurate reporting. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring potential issues highlighted by the metrics due to time constraints or a desire to avoid difficult conversations, demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the importance of continuous improvement and regulatory oversight. This can result in systemic problems going unaddressed, increasing the risk of future noncompliance. A third incorrect approach, which involves making assumptions about the meaning of the metrics without consulting relevant documentation or experts, is prone to errors and misinterpretations, potentially leading to flawed decision-making and regulatory breaches. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the context and objectives of the performance metrics. This should be followed by a rigorous process of data validation and comparison against established benchmarks and regulatory mandates. When discrepancies or areas of concern arise, the next step is to seek clarification from appropriate internal or external sources, such as legal counsel or compliance officers, before taking any action or making any representations. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and compliant with all applicable laws and guidelines relevant to MasTec's operations. Question 14. Governance review demonstrates potential material misstatements in MasTec's recent financial reporting. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional ethics for MasTec's management? Option A. Instruct the accounting department to make adjustments to the current period's financials to offset the identified misstatements without formally restating prior periods, citing immateriality. Option B. Inform the audit committee of the potential misstatements, but instruct them to keep the matter confidential and address it only if specifically questioned by external auditors. Option C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive internal investigation, engage external accounting experts if necessary, and prepare to restate financial statements if the misstatements are confirmed, ensuring full compliance with SEC regulations and GAAP. Option D. Delay any formal action until the next scheduled audit, hoping the issues will be resolved internally or become less significant over time. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive internal investigation, engage external accounting experts if necessary, and prepare to restate financial statements if the misstatements are confirmed, ensuring full compliance with SEC regulations and GAAP. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight concerning its financial reporting and internal controls. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate financial information with the imperative to adhere to established accounting principles and regulatory requirements. A governance review highlighting potential misstatements necessitates immediate and thorough investigation, as failure to address these issues can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. A correct approach involves a systematic and transparent process of investigation, documentation, and remediation, guided by the principles of generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, and relevant Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, regulations. This approach ensures that any identified misstatements are corrected accurately and that the company's internal controls are strengthened to prevent future occurrences. It prioritizes integrity and compliance, which are paramount in maintaining investor confidence and meeting legal obligations. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying or ignoring the findings of the governance review would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to the filing of inaccurate financial statements, violating SEC Rule 10b-5, which prohibits fraud and misrepresentation in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. Furthermore, it would breach the company's fiduciary duty to its shareholders and undermine the effectiveness of its internal control systems, potentially leading to Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX) violations related to the accuracy and reliability of financial reporting. Another incorrect approach, such as selectively disclosing information or attempting to correct the misstatements without proper accounting treatment and disclosure, would also constitute a regulatory violation and an ethical breach, as it would fail to provide a complete and fair picture of the company's financial position. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes a proactive and principled stance. This involves 1. Recognizing the seriousness of governance review findings and their potential impact. 2. Initiating an immediate, independent, and thorough investigation. 3. Consulting with legal counsel and accounting experts to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations and accounting standards. 4. Documenting all steps taken, findings, and decisions meticulously. 5. Implementing corrective actions and strengthening internal controls to prevent recurrence. 6. Ensuring timely and transparent disclosure of any material misstatements and their corrections to regulatory bodies and stakeholders. Question 15. Quality control measures reveal that a critical MasTec infrastructure project is experiencing significant scope creep and potential budget overruns. The project manager is proposing to expedite the remaining phases by reducing the depth of the risk assessment process for the final stages, arguing that past projects of a similar nature have not encountered major issues in these areas. What is the most appropriate approach for MasTec to take in this situation? Option A. Halt the project immediately and initiate a complete reevaluation of the scope and budget before proceeding. Option B. Proceed with the expedited timeline by reducing the risk assessment depth, relying on the project manager's experience and historical data from similar projects. Option C. Delegate the revised, expedited risk assessment entirely to an external risk management firm to ensure objectivity and speed. Option D. Conduct a focused, but thorough, risk assessment for the remaining project phases, prioritizing the identification and mitigation of risks directly related to the identified scope creep and potential budget overruns, while ensuring that all critical regulatory compliance points are still addressed. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the expedited timeline by reducing the risk assessment depth, relying on the project manager's experience and historical data from similar projects. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires MasTec to balance the need for efficient project execution with its ethical and regulatory obligations to accurately assess and manage project risks. The pressure to meet deadlines and budget constraints can create a temptation to downplay or ignore potential risks, which can have severe consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure that risk assessment is thorough, objective, and integrated into all stages of the project lifecycle. The correct approach involves proactively identifying, analyzing, and mitigating potential risks throughout the project. This aligns with the principles of responsible project management and regulatory compliance, which mandate that companies operate with due diligence and foresight. Specifically, regulatory frameworks often require companies to have robust risk management systems in place to prevent harm, ensure financial stability, and maintain operational integrity. By prioritizing a comprehensive risk assessment, MasTec demonstrates a commitment to these principles, safeguarding its operations, stakeholders, and reputation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without a thorough risk evaluation fails to meet regulatory expectations for due diligence. This can lead to unforeseen issues, project delays, cost overruns, and potential safety or environmental incidents, all of which can result in significant financial penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies on historical data without considering current project-specific factors is also professionally unacceptable. While historical data can be informative, each project has unique variables, and a failure to adapt risk assessments to these specifics can lead to overlooking critical new risks or misjudging the likelihood and impact of known risks. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and can violate regulatory requirements for ongoing risk monitoring and adaptation. Finally, an approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to external consultants without internal oversight or integration into MasTec's operational framework is problematic. While external expertise can be valuable, MasTec retains ultimate responsibility for its risk management. A lack of internal engagement and understanding of the assessed risks can lead to ineffective mitigation strategies and a failure to embed risk awareness into the company culture, potentially contravening regulatory expectations for internal control and accountability. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic and integrated approach to risk assessment. This involves 1. Clearly defining the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. 2. Identifying all potential risks relevant to the project and MasTec's operations. 3. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 4. Developing appropriate mitigation strategies. 5. Implementing and monitoring these strategies. And 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment as the project progresses and circumstances change. This framework ensures that risk management is not an isolated activity, but a continuous process embedded within the company's operational and strategic decision-making. Question 16. System analysis indicates that during a routine site inspection at a MasTec project, a supervisor observes a deviation from established safety protocols that could potentially lead to an immediate hazard for the crew. The supervisor is under pressure to meet a tight project deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action for the supervisor to take? Option A. Delegate the responsibility of assessing and addressing the safety concern to a junior team member to avoid personal involvement and potential project delays. Option B. Continue the work as planned to meet the deadline, but make a note to address the safety protocol deviation during the next scheduled safety meeting. Option C. Inform the crew verbally about the potential hazard and instruct them to be extra cautious while continuing the work to avoid further delays. Option D. Immediately halt the work in the affected area, document the deviation and potential hazard, and initiate the company's formal incident reporting and investigation procedure. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the work in the affected area, document the deviation and potential hazard, and initiate the company's formal incident reporting and investigation procedure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must navigate potential conflicts between business objectives and compliance requirements. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that the pursuit of efficiency and cost savings does not inadvertently lead to violations of safety regulations or ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with the paramount importance of worker safety and adherence to established legal frameworks. The correct approach involves prioritizing the immediate cessation of work in the identified unsafe condition and initiating a formal reporting and investigation process. This aligns with the regulatory framework that mandates employers to provide a safe working environment and to address hazards promptly. By stopping the work, MasTec demonstrates a commitment to worker safety, which is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation. Initiating a formal investigation ensures that the root cause of the issue is identified and that corrective actions are implemented to prevent recurrence, thereby upholding MasTec's responsibility to comply with all applicable regulations. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the work while documenting the concern for later review fails to address the immediate risk to personnel. This directly contravenes the regulatory duty to ensure a safe workplace, potentially exposing employees to harm and creating liability for MasTec. Another incorrect approach, which is to address the issue informally without formal documentation or reporting, undermines the integrity of the compliance process. This can lead to a lack of accountability, inconsistent application of safety protocols, and a failure to meet regulatory requirements for hazard identification and mitigation. It also misses the opportunity to learn from the incident and improve future operations. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the potential risks and regulatory implications. This should be followed by an assessment of the severity of the risk and the immediate actions required to mitigate it. The framework should then guide the professional to consult relevant company policies and regulatory guidelines, and to initiate appropriate formal reporting and investigation procedures. This structured approach ensures that decisions are not only expedient, but also legally sound and ethically responsible, fostering a culture of safety and compliance within MasTec. Question 17. Investigation of a situation at a MasTec project site where a client representative has requested a deviation from standard safety lockout/tagout procedures during a critical equipment maintenance task, citing a need to expedite the work. The MasTec supervisor on site is aware that the requested deviation, while potentially faster, significantly increases the risk of accidental equipment startup and injury to personnel. Option A, defer the decision entirely to the client, stating that MasTec will perform the work as directed by the client, regardless of the safety implications. Option B, immediately implement the client's requested deviation from lockout/tagout procedures to maintain a positive client relationship and expedite project timelines. Option C, agree to the client's request, but instruct the MasTec crew to be extra vigilant during the maintenance task to mitigate the increased risk. Option D, inform the client that MasTec cannot comply with the request due to established safety protocols and regulatory requirements, and proceed with the standard, safe lockout/tagout procedures. The correct answer is B. Immediately implement the client's requested deviation from lockout/tagout procedures to maintain a positive client relationship and expedite project timelines. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for a MasTec employee due to the potential conflict between a client's request and established safety protocols. The core difficulty lies in balancing client satisfaction with the paramount importance of adhering to regulatory requirements designed to ensure worker safety and project integrity. Misjudging this situation could lead to regulatory violations, safety incidents, and damage to MasTec's reputation. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to MasTec's established safety procedures and relevant regulations over the client's immediate, potentially unsafe, request. This is justified by the regulatory framework governing construction and telecommunications work, which mandates specific safety standards and practices. MasTec, as a responsible contractor, is legally and ethically bound to uphold these standards to protect its employees, the public, and the integrity of its work. Deviating from these protocols, even at client's behest, would constitute a serious breach of regulatory compliance and professional duty. An incorrect approach of immediately complying with the client's request without proper assessment or escalation would be a direct violation of safety regulations. This demonstrates a failure to uphold the company's commitment to safety and a disregard for the potential risks involved. Another incorrect approach, that of deferring the decision solely to the client without asserting MasTec safety obligations, fails to acknowledge the company's responsibility for ensuring safe work practices. This abdication of responsibility could still lead to regulatory noncompliance if the client's request is inherently unsafe. Finally, an approach that involves attempting to find a workaround that bypasses established safety checks, even if seemingly efficient, still carries significant regulatory and ethical risks, as it undermines the purpose of the safety protocols. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue, which in this case is a potential conflict between client desire and safety regulations. The next step is to consult relevant company policies and applicable regulations. If there is any doubt or conflict, the professional should escalate the issue to their supervisor or the designated safety officer for guidance and a definitive decision. This ensures that decisions are made with the full understanding of regulatory requirements and company standards, prioritizing safety and compliance. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a MasTec project manager, facing a tight deadline on a critical infrastructure project, is considering a minor deviation from a standard safety protocol to expedite a specific task. This deviation, while seemingly insignificant, could potentially increase the risk of minor equipment damage, but is unlikely to cause immediate harm to personnel. Project manager is debating whether to proceed with the deviation or to halt the task and seek formal approval for an alternative method, which would cause a significant delay. Option A. Immediately halt the task and formally escalate the proposed deviation and its potential risks to MasTec's designated safety officer or compliance department for review and guidance. Option B. Proceed with the deviation, documenting the decision and the perceived minimal risk, and address any potential minor damage after the task is completed. Option C. Instruct the team to proceed with the deviation, emphasizing that the deadline is paramount and that they should be extra vigilant to avoid any issues. Option D. Ignore the project manager's suggestion and continue with the task as originally planned, assuming the project manager is exaggerating the potential for delay. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the deviation, documenting the decision and the perceived minimal risk, and address any potential minor damage after the task is completed. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because MasTec, as a company operating within a regulated industry, must balance the need for efficient project execution with strict adherence to safety and environmental regulations. The conflict arises when a project manager, under pressure to meet deadlines, considers bypassing established safety protocols. This requires careful judgment to prioritize long-term compliance and ethical conduct over short-term gains. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to the appropriate compliance or safety officer within MasTec. This upholds professional responsibility by recognizing that the project manager's proposed shortcut violates established regulatory frameworks and internal policies designed to protect workers and the environment. Specifically, this aligns with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration (OSHA) regulations in the U.S., which mandate that employers provide a safe workplace and that employees report unsafe conditions. By escalating, the project manager acts in accordance with the spirit and letter of these regulations, ensuring that MasTec maintains its commitment to safety and avoids potential legal repercussions, fines, and reputational damage. This proactive step also allows for a proper review and, if necessary, adjustment of project timelines or resources to accommodate safety requirements, rather than risking a serious incident. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the project without addressing the safety concerns, either by assuming the risk is minimal or by hoping the shortcut goes unnoticed. This directly contravenes OSHA standards, which do not permit the delegation of safety responsibility to chance or the assumption of risk without proper mitigation. Such an action could lead to severe accidents, injuries, or fatalities, resulting in significant legal liabilities for MasTec, including hefty fines and potential criminal charges. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the project manager's suggestion and continue as planned without any internal discussion or review of the safety protocol. While seemingly compliant, this misses an opportunity to reinforce the importance of safety and could lead to a culture where such suggestions are normalized, even if not acted upon immediately. It fails to proactively address a potential deviation from best practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the core issue, a potential violation of safety regulations. 2. Consulting relevant policies and regulations, understanding the specific OSHA requirements and MasTec's internal safety protocols. 3. Evaluating risks, assessing the potential consequences of both proceeding with the shortcut and reporting the issue. 4. Seeking guidance, escalating the matter to the designated compliance or safety authority. 5. Acting ethically and legally, ensuring all decisions align with MasTec's values and legal obligations. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a key client for MasTec is pressuring the project manager to expedite the installation of a new utility line, suggesting that certain pre-installation safety inspections, while technically required by OSHA, can be fast-tracked to meet an aggressive deadline. The project manager is concerned about maintaining a good client relationship, but also aware of the potential safety and legal ramifications. Option A. Proceed with the expedited installation, performing only a cursory review of safety protocols to satisfy the client's immediate request while documenting the client's directive. Option B. Inform the client that all OSHA safety regulations must be strictly followed, and if the deadline cannot be met without compromising safety, MasTec will need to request an extension or adjust the project scope accordingly, while immediately escalating the client's pressure to MasTec's senior management and legal department. Option C. Agree to the client's request to fast-track inspections, assuming the risk is minimal and that the client's influence will protect MasTec from any potential repercussions. Option D. Conduct the safety inspections as required, but delay informing MasTec management about the client's pressure to avoid creating internal complications. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the expedited installation, performing only a cursory review of safety protocols to satisfy the client's immediate request while documenting the client's directive. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for MasTec employees due to the inherent conflict between client demands and regulatory compliance. The need to balance project timelines and client satisfaction with adherence to safety regulations requires careful judgment and a strong ethical compass. Misinterpreting or disregarding safety protocols can lead to severe consequences, including accidents, legal penalties, and reputational damage for MasTec. The correct approach involves prioritizing safety regulations above all else, even when faced with client pressure or perceived project delays. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence, which are paramount in the construction and utility sectors. Specifically, MasTec's adherence to OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, standards, as mandated by U.S. federal law, is non-negotiable. This approach ensures the well-being of workers and the public, and protects MasTec from legal repercussions and reputational harm. An incorrect approach would be to accede to the client's request to bypass safety checks to expedite the project. This directly violates OSHA regulations, which mandate specific safety procedures for all construction activities. Failing to conduct these checks exposes workers to significant risks and places MasTec in violation of federal law, potentially leading to fines, work stoppages, and increased insurance premiums. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt a superficial or rushed safety check that does not meet the full requirements of the regulations. While appearing to comply, this is a form of regulatory evasion and carries the same risks as outright noncompliance. Undermines the purpose of safety regulations, which is to prevent harm, and still exposes MasTec to liability if an incident occurs. A third incorrect approach would be to delay informing MasTec management about the client's request and the potential conflict. This failure to communicate proactively prevents timely intervention and resolution, potentially allowing the situation to escalate. Transparent and prompt reporting of such issues is crucial for maintaining ethical standards and ensuring that appropriate company resources and expertise are deployed to manage the situation effectively and in compliance with all applicable laws. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue, a conflict between client demands and regulatory requirements. The next step is to consult relevant regulations and company policies, in this case, OSHA standards and MasTec's internal safety protocols. The professional must then assess the risks associated with each potential course of action, prioritizing worker safety and legal compliance. Open communication with both the client and internal stakeholders, including management and safety officers, is essential to find a compliant solution. If a compliant solution cannot be reached with the client, the professional must escalate the issue to management for further guidance and decision-making, ensuring that no action is taken that compromises safety or regulatory adherence. Question 20. When evaluating a situation where a MasTec project manager is offered a valuable gift by a key client during a project review meeting, which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to ethical business practices and regulatory compliance for MasTec employees? Option A. Accept the gift and reciprocate with a similar gesture to maintain goodwill without consulting MasTec's policy. Option B. Accept the gift and use it to foster a closer personal relationship with the client, believing it will benefit future MasTec projects. Option C. Politely decline the gift, citing MasTec's policy on gifts and entertainment, and thank the client for their generosity and the positive working relationship. Option D. Accept the gift, assuming it is a token of appreciation, and plan to disclose it to MasTec management later if it seems significant. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the gift, citing MasTec's policy on gifts and entertainment, and thank the client for their generosity and the positive working relationship. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for MasTec employees regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of accepting gifts from clients. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to maintain positive client relationships with the imperative to avoid even the appearance of impropriety or undue influence, which could compromise MasTec's integrity and violate regulatory standards. Careful judgment is required to discern between acceptable gestures of goodwill and those that could be construed as bribery or conflicts of interest. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to MasTec's internal gift policy, which is designed to align with relevant regulatory frameworks governing business conduct and anti-corruption. This approach prioritizes transparency, fairness, and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. By following established policy, MasTec employees ensure that their actions are compliant with regulations that prohibit bribery and unethical business practices, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and legal standing. This proactive adherence to policy demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach of accepting a gift without considering its value or the context of the client relationship is professionally unacceptable. This failure to assess the gift against company policy and regulatory guidelines could lead to violations of anti-bribery laws, such as the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act (FCPA), if MasTec operates internationally or similar domestic regulations. Such actions can create a perception of favoritism or compromise independent decision-making, undermining trust and potentially leading to legal repercussions for both the employee and MasTec. Another incorrect approach of accepting a gift and failing to disclose it to MasTec management, even if the gift appears minor, is also professionally unsound. This lack of transparency can mask potential conflicts of interest and prevents the company from exercising due diligence. It violates principles of accountability and can be seen as an attempt to circumvent established ethical protocols, potentially leading to disciplinary action and reputational damage. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of MasTec's code of conduct and gift policy. Before accepting any gift, an employee should ask, does this gift comply with MasTec's policy? Could this gift influence my professional judgment or create a conflict of interest? Is this gift consistent with the principles of fairness and integrity? If there is any doubt, the employee should err on the side of caution, decline the gift, or seek guidance from their supervisor or the compliance department. This systematic evaluation ensures that actions remain ethical and legally compliant.